Honorable Finance Minister, ma'am, if we can request you to please say a few words, if you could, you've got the mic right there for you also, ma'am. If you could talk on the address of India, the global bright spot. Ma'am, either here or there, wherever you're comfortable.
Good morning, and thank you to the organizers, Times Group. Particularly, you have made this as a calendar event. And some of the very thought-provoking discussions happened during this event, just in time for me also to get some inputs before we freeze on what's going to be the budget for each year, every year like that. So it's well-timed. And this year's navigating geoeconomics is a very contemporary and relevant topic. I can see the list of speakers. But for India, I think it poses challenges as well as we can harp on the strengths that we have. Navigating geoeconomics, being a bright spot of growing fast and steady growth, keeping the growth at that kind of a level every year is something which people of India are achieving, and I think each one of us, and as much as all of us, the political parties, and I would think the critics should recognize it, because that's a credit which has to be given to the people of India. Much against all predictions, COVID or no COVID, people just didn't sit back. The resilience of India is what is the story which all of us will have to stand by, help, facilitate to have that kind of a growth happening for the next several decades. But even as I say all this, I think it is important for us to understand that trade is no longer what we were talking about. The global trade. The normal story would be for people to say, you should have greater free trade. India's looking inwards. You have too many barriers. And India is a kind of country, since post-independence, we want to be answering people and responding to people. Whilst I think it's a very good thing to hear people give their advice, but it's also for India and countries like India who have aspirations to mark their own goalposts, not in denial or not in defiance of good advice coming from anywhere, but chalking your own growth story, I think gives the confidence that you're picking up from the strengths that you have, and based on that, you also have the strength to meet the challenges. Today, in the last 10 years, the kind of growth, the kind of reform, the kind of strengthening of every sector, financial inclusion, getting women to participate in workforce, giving nutrition, childcare, making sure families have access to finance, to banking, ensuring basic minimum insurance for common citizens at government's own worked out premium, which is not going to be burdensome, providing affordable housing, making sure there's water in the villages. And even for those small entrepreneurs, making sure the road connects to the highway. And making sure that basic minimum health, not just allopathic, but also wellness, holistic health, All that in the 10 years, and I'm not saying it didn't happen earlier, but it were fragmented. They were all over the place. You couldn't have aggregation. You couldn't think, oh, if there can be Wayanad, Malappuram, and Ernakulam or Thrissur like area providing or cashing on the natural rubber supplies that they have to make footballs which will be bought all over the world. That's a kind of entrepreneurial mastery, if only we can facilitate, can happen. Same is the case with sports equipment from Jalandhar. They meet global standards and therefore they take care of the local economy at the same time aspiring to reach and scale up to meet global demands. Tirupur can be another story. You can pick up on stories like this, and that's been all over the place, which is very good. That's how democratically spread it should be. Local innovations. But it is gradually moving towards having such collective benefits all over, and whether you want to copy China, whether you want to learn from Europe, these experiments have happened. But what we are seeing in the last 10 years is wherever these kind of entrepreneurial spirit exists, we should give them that backup, we should give them the strength, not ask all of them to go into an SCZs only and then see if they can prosper. So the handicaps of copying lock, stock and barrel experiences which have happened in each national context have actually given us more problems to solve rather than address issues. I'm not denying that they had a role to play in promoting exports, SEZs, let's say. But it is equally important to give the strength to our entrepreneurs wherever they are, and that is why our government, Prime Minister Modi, has given so much of focus for SCs, MSMEs. Wherever they are, let them be a cluster. We will give them the facility, they can grow. So with all this done in last 10 years, inclusion, credit access, mudra, financial inclusion, everybody having an account, and so on, the credit footprint of every Indian has now grown that he is able to access credit formally from the banks. I'm saying all this because it is possible to aspire to reach that India which contributed to 25% to the world's trade. 25% global trade emanated from India. That's the kind of period we should be aiming at, and that's the kind of target we should be aiming at, and therefore Vikasit Bharat. And therefore the goals for reaching certain aspirations, and therefore revive manufacturing, revive agriculture, bring value addition to agriculture. And in a sector where minimum government presence is recorded, and all of us recognize that, service sector really grew on its own strength, reached over 60% contribution to our GDP. That one sector. But of course, service is not just IT. Tourism, hospitality, all these will also have to come in. So the policy framework with which all of us are working is to ensure that every sector gets the facilitation so required so that they can grow at their own pace, but equally aspire to reach higher goals. And that's where every little facilitation mechanism has been given a chance. And in this, I would like to, since we are talking about an economic conclave, structural reforms have played a very big role. And that is why when you talk of schooling, it's better to have schools at the primary level being equipped very well. We have Atal Tinkering Labs going there. We have innovation centers being established in tier 2, tier 3 city colleges. All this requires coordination between center and state. And Prime Minister Modi is known for his fiscal management. If central government has set for itself goals of transparency in budget making, making sure that your fiscal management is seen by everybody and meets up the minimum accountability standards. We've seen that we are able to bring down debt to GDP since post-COVID, when it had touched over 60%. Now it's already coming down, and we've set a goal that from the next year, next financial year, that should be the core focus area. Fiscal deficit will still be a marker. We will care for it. So if debt is brought down, and with all that, you had the very entrepreneurial bankers speak to us about how it is changing the ecosystem today. Equity receives a lot of attention. We are trying to deepen the bond market so that more funds can come in, not just for the equity market, but also to the bond market. But with all this said, that discipline which Union government is showing through steady leadership of Prime Minister Modi, continuing for the third term, and looking at the macroeconomic strength is where the global positioning of India happens. You're able to sit at the high table and negotiate. It's the recognition of the strength of India's economy. And that strength has come because of a stable government. And it is in this context, because it is Times Network's India Economic Conclave, you tend to invite a lot of people from the state governments as well. I'll put this before you. I said this in the parliament yesterday. Unless this accountability, this transparency, this understanding that fiscal management is a priority, is understood by all states. I'm not saying it's understood by us and therefore I'm dictating to the states. I'm saying it is understood and recognized under Prime Minister Modi that it has to be a principle that we will hold good every year. Each year, we've shown our record. Similar should be the approach of all the state governments as well. Because RBI's document which has come out, various studies which have come out, have shown how, where the debt to GDP is worrisome, which is the truth about some states. I'm not naming them here, nor did I name them in the parliament. Unless the debt to GDP, GSDP there, is managed well, better, and is kept within the FRBM limits, and the stock of debt which has been accumulating over the years on high rate of interest, which many states are unable to service, unless even those are brought down and to an acceptable level, you will be borrowing to service the loans. You're not borrowing to take care of developmental expenditure. That's a poor play in the fiscal terrain. These have to be changed, or else the momentum that India has acquired in the last 10 years, so that we can achieve the goal that we've set for ourselves, that developed India by 2047, is going to be very difficult to achieve. And again, that 60% contribution of the service sector towards GDP is admirable. But we have to spend our time also to see how our manufacturing is going to be picking up speed. And in that, innovation, money on R&D will be absolutely critical. I was just reading somewhere. Globally, if 70% is the contribution of private sector for the gross expenditure on research and development, in India, it's not even 36%. So if we're talking to the private sector saying, where are their investments? And many people question me, why don't you tell the private sector, you're doing the heavy lifting in terms of capital expenditure, that every year your number is growing up, which is very good, and which is why our growth was sustained at the level at which it got stabilized almost post-COVID. Why is the private sector not spending, not increasing capacity? And in the parliament, I'm told you work only for corporate sector because you reduce the tax rate. In 2019, we brought the corporate tax down. It was a favor, apparently. That's a opposition's charge against me, that we've done it to the corporate sector, but they've taken their profit and they are enjoying themselves, but they're not expanding their capacities. I think that's an unfair criticism. That reduction was necessary. Businesses have to grow in a country. And Prime Minister Modi has never shied away by saying, I will support corporate sector because they have to grow, they give jobs, they add to the GDP of the nation. We did that, all right. Questions are being asked about why they can't invest more, which is fine. They'll take their call. But this data on gross expenditure, on R&D, was an eye-opener for me. 36% only in India, whereas it's 70% elsewhere. So private sector R&D expenditure is the one which gives you the additional value as you grow, because you're able to reach out on many new things. So the GCC, the data centers coming to give our job market a big fillip, is very welcome, and for which, of course, the energy security of the country will also have to be worked on. That is why India is keen to we have brought the bill to have the nuclear energy also supported. The small modular reactors will be built, and India will rely on that as a renewable source of energy, green, other than, of course, the pump storage and hydro, solar, wind. We will be placing a lot of emphasis on this. So the long and short of it is, globally it is now very clear, trade is not fair, it's not free. India can be lectured saying you're very inward looking, you are a tariff king and so on. But tariff has been weaponized. India's intention was never to weaponize tariff. We of course safeguarded our own industries against flooding which happens from a predator. But today weaponization goes without criticism. There are, whispers in the corridor, oh no, that's not right, you shouldn't be doing it. And suddenly we have newer people coming up saying, we'll come up with tariff barriers. And there's no questioning. So that seems to be the new normal. Trade is getting weaponized through tariff, through many other measures, and India will have to negotiate its way carefully in this and not just take care of trade, but I think overall our economy's strength is what is going to give us that additional advantage. So I hope this Times Economic Conclave has all a open, free discussion to tell us what is developing for Indian economy. We are here as a responsive government. We always come back to you to say what we are doing for industry, small, medium, big. India's strengths will have to be played back. But as a final word, I would say every Indian, inclusive journalists, Indian, criticize India for what it is not doing. But don't undermine Indian people's achievement. It is they who are toiling to make India a successful economy. By every time you're standing up and saying, no, I question this, or no, I don't accept this, government's data is this, government's this is that, you're able to see in the ground, on the ground where people are showing you that their hard work, supported by institutional arrangements, whether it is banking, whether it is policy, whether it is taxation, within 12 months, within one calendar year, tell me if any government in India has given direct tax and indirect tax benefits to the common citizen. Tell me a government in India which is readily, since after 1961, has changed the income tax law to the benefit of the SSC. Simplify it, make it easy to understand, digitize it, have faceless assessments. And that is the kind of rapidity with which India is changing. People are understanding it and they are giving the mandate accordingly. But those who don't receive the mandate, their frustration is showing, but it is showing to undermine the people's achievement, and that is what I stand up against. So, but I will hear from you. I'm sure many new good ideas will come up for us to carry forward our budgetary and non-budgetary intervention into the economy. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I request you to stay on just for a minute longer. I'd like to invite up on stage Navika Kumar, the Group Editor-in-Chief, Times Network, and Editor-in-Chief for Times Now and Times Now Bharat, to felicitate ma'am and to say a few words.
Well, it is my proud privilege to thank Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman. Ms. Sitharaman, as a woman editor to a woman finance minister, it's a pleasure to have you here with us to inaugurate this event, the calendar event, and get as a bonus 5 headlines that will rule the day. Tariff being weaponized, the message to the opposition about obstructionism, the fact that you're looking at interventions and you are a listening government, as well as the fact that you said profligacy will have to be stopped, debt to state GSDP ratios will have to be looked at. Love the statement, but it only comes after one election and before the next. Would have loved to question you on that, but on a day when Parliament is on a day when you have bills going on a day when you have the question hour going on, we're extremely grateful to you for joining us here. And as a token of our gratitude, may I just felicitate. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman deserves a louder round of applause than that. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.